Before the video starts, I wanted to be sure that I introduce the founder and the creator of the ICCC and the Imperial Commissary. His name is Michael Havens, and he is one outstanding gentleman. He works his butt off to bring us one of the best conventions there is for a fraction of the price if you go somewhere else. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to meet some of my heroes from my childhood. And also, this year, ICCC V will be going on the 26th for VIPs and the 27th and the 28th for general admissions. Everyone, you need to be sure that you come. This is something you don't want to miss. And now we will get into the video with Mcdiarmid. And also, forgive my photography. It will be a little shaky as it is me holding it without a gimbal. So, enjoy.
The magic of technology. Good morning from the dark side.
That's a fantastic way to start, and a good question I have for you. Where did you come up with that voice?
Sort of roundabout there, actually. It was, I don't know, I saw a great Japanese actor in Edinburgh at the International Festival there, and he was appearing in a production of Medea, which is some people know, a great Greek tragedy. He was actually playing a woman, and he was very young, but he produced an extraordinary voice. And like many Japanese actors, their training enables them to do it from the stomach, from below. Most of our resonance as actors is either in the head, which it is now, or in the chest, which is there. But further down, you can get it from the stomach. You can't do it all the time, otherwise you'll be throwing up. It's short takes, so it worked. Also, I thought it went with the face, really. You know, a disgusting reptilian face. Even a disgusting reptilian voice.
It is incredible because there's a famous company that has a tagline. That's just this peaceful tagline that they say, but you say it sounds so evil, and that's do it.
Oh yes.
That was my imitation, by the way.
That's very good. I'm very impressed. That was a good day, the do it day. You remember my horrible, devious character had arranged for himself to be, imprisoned, kidnapped, and in order really to slaughter Christopher Lee. And I didn't want to do that. I really like Christopher. But it had to be done, and Anakin was sort of dithering, So it was kind of fun. We did so many takes, as the way you do. And then I did one with sort of impatient, but being asked to do yet another take, and impatient with Anakin not doing his job. So it came out as, do it. And George said, that's the one. And then I didn't know it would enter Star Wars history, but here you all are.
And how did you get into Star Wars in the beginning? Let's go all the way back to 1982, I guess?
Yes, God, many years ago, when I was older and younger at the same time, if you know what I mean. I'm so thrilled with this chair, I can't stop swiveling. Before I answer your question, a little aside about this.
They told me they squeaked not to move, and I said, what about Ian?
Oh, really?
They're like, it doesn't matter, Ian can do it.
I like a good swivel. But when we were doing the first one, Return of the Jedi, of course I was in the chair, and everything was automated, But the automation could never hit the mark, somehow. So George said, would you mind doing it? I said, no, not at all. So underneath, I've now ruined it for millions of you all over the world, underneath my garment with my little feet going. Every time I sit on a swivel chair, it all comes back to me. But get back to your question. One day, I was at home, and the phone rang. It was my agent, and he said the great words, George Lucas would like to see you. Oh, I said. And outside of my window, I could see a car, which they'd sent from Elstree Studios, where they were filming a film called Blue Harvest, which many of you know, was the original artificial title. Oh, it's gone dark.
It's on very dark side.
Yes, I know. Have I done that? So a film called Blue Harvest that apparently George Lucas was making at Elstree. Well, it didn't sound very probable to me, but you want to meet George Lucas? Of course I do. So I got in the car, and it was lunchtime on set of a film that later was called Return of the Jedi. I think it was called Revenge of the Jedi before it was called Return of the Jedi. And I met George and Richard Marquand, the director of the movie, and we had a very nice chat, 10 minutes. Unfortunately, I can't remember anything we talked about, but it was nothing to do with movies or my career or their careers or anything. So 10 minutes was up, and I was thanked, and on the way out, George turned to Richard and said, "Hey, great nose." And I thought, that's sort of flattering, isn't it? Anyway, I thought, you're very good, you can come back. I thought nothing more of it, really, until I got home, and the phone was ringing again. It was my agent who said, "It's great news, you've got the part." I went, "Oh, that's great. What's the part?" And he went, minutes later, leafing through some papers or other. Apparently, he's called the Emperor of the Universe. So I said, "Okay, we'll be doing it then." That's the story.
A nice, interesting segue from that. So 16 years later, the 90s, Mr. Lucas calls you back, or how do you get contact that way?
Yeah, his casting director, a charming woman called Robin Gerlin, phoned me up and said, "George is in town. He'd like to say hello." Okay, great. So I thought, maybe we'll have a drink or lunch or something like that. So I went along to his hotel. There he was, and I always say this, and it's a terrible joke, but wearing the same shirt he was wearing all those years. It's a check shirt, I'm sure he has one or two. And so, it was like an apparition, like a sort of legendary ghost. Anyway, he said, "Can we get you something, what would you like?" And I said, "I'll just take a water, thank you." And he said, "Well, do you know anyone who wants to play an emperor?" I said, "I think you know the answer to that." He said, "Yeah, I thought I did. You can give the water back." And that was the end of the interview. And then he told me a little bit, but not too much, about the prequels and about two characters. One called Senator Palpatine. I said, "Oh, great." Yeah, he starts off as and George said, a perfectly ordinary, not terribly interesting, not obviously evil or warped in any way. I mean, he was a politician, so that's a kind of given, isn't it? But there's another character, he said, who is all of those things, who's really terrible, and he has a sort of insidious effect on everyone or everything he touches. And I thought, that sounds a really good part. I wish I was playing that one. Little did I know. And that's the phrase for joining up to the Star Wars universe, little did I know. And that's the way it always remained. But then I found out fairly soon that those two people were one, and it wasn't exactly hidden from the audience either. So it was the progression of evil, not just my character, of course, but principally the descent into darkness of the guy who later became Darth Vader. So we were telling his story, and in order to tell his story, they had to tell a bit of mine as well. So I got lucky for the second time.
And then you got lucky for the third time.
You're exactly right. Amazing, because as you know, at the end of Return of the Jedi, I was killed. I was dead. And how did I know that? Because I asked George Lucas after I'd gone down. I said, "Does he come back in any form, Maybe he's another person, maybe, I don't know, another creature." He went, "No, he's dead." So imagine my surprise when I got a telephone call all those years later from J.J. Abrams, who said they were thinking of reviving, that word really, resonated, the character. Was I interested? Was I interested? So I said yes, and I said, "But George told me he was dead." He said, "Yes, I think George would probably revise that view now." Anyway, in our script, he's very much alive. He has survived with great difficulty. I said, how has he managed that? He said, well, we don't want to go into too much detail at this stage. But I think at that point, they were also thinking that I might have frozen myself, you know, a bit like Harrison early on. He doesn't have much choice. And that was in case he didn't come back because he had another movie to do, I think. But, you know, as far as the saga is concerned, you know, he was iced or something. Didn't that happen to Walt Disney? Oh, there was a, don't quote me. There was a rumor anyway. Anyway, that clearly wasn't going to happen. They said no, but of course he would have a plan B, the Emperor. You know, he's not an idiot. Obviously, he might, you know, be severely damaged in one way or another. So he had the best medical team in the universe standing by, and presumably the best drugs and so on. So it was possible for him to survive. And you'll see also how he continued to manage that in that sort of galactic wheelchair that I was in, and very carefully controlled by those little people underneath who were injecting me with all sorts of impossible fluids. And that was his survival, and he got himself to a state when he more than survived. He was ready to execute, not Order 66 this time, but another even more megalomanic plan than he had in mind than before. So, as you say, I got lucky for the third time.
Are you gonna get lucky for the fourth time? Or are you gonna, no comment?
That's very interesting. I'm dead as a dodo. That's unquestionable. I'll never forgive Daisy Ridley for doing that to me. The ingratitude of the grandchildren. You find out, you know, you do everything for them, and what do? They incinerate you. But as you know, the universe is still alive, and he's around during certain periods when certain series are being constructed or, you know, about to be constructed. So I have nothing to tell you, but who knows? Whether my physical presence will be there or not, my presence will definitely be felt.
I think you were talking a while ago, and you said you wanted to hear from the audience. So,
I'd love to.
So Dave, the silly little guy that introduced us, he's going to run around with a microphone, and you're going to be able to ask questions through him. Do we turn on the lights for that?
Yeah,
lights
that would
down.
be great.
What do we do? Lights up, maybe?
Yeah.
Somebody leaned against a light switch. If you might be leaning against a light switch, it's kind of a joke.
Oh, that's not a joke. You're serious.
So you didn't mean to plunge people in the dark?
No, it looks
I thought
amazing.
they thought it was to cue my joke.
It
You know.
looks amazing.
Yeah, it was great mood
See in
set.
there.
So do we have somebody who wants to come up to Mr. Longwater for a question?
I got one right.
Hello.
Hi.
What if question? If you could choose any other Jedi to be your apprentice besides Anakin, who do you choose?
Oh, it's such a difficult question. You mean in the real world, or in the world of Star Wars? I don't know. It's very, very hard. Someone, I won't be specific, you know, somebody young and corruptible. That sort of gives it quite a wide choice. Because that's what he did in Jedi, you know. Vader was sort of running down, literally. So he needed his son. He needed the same kind of energy and so on. But the son's bright enough not to allow himself to be seduced to the dark side. So it would have to be some young and unsuspecting talent. And there are a lot of those in the movie industry, so I could just sort of move around. And I could have the odd audition, you know, things like that. And if they behaved themselves, they wouldn't get the part. Hello.
Hello. Just wondering if you have a favorite piece of dialogue as either Chancellor Palpatine or the Emperor.
Yeah, there are a few. But for bad taste reasons, I prefer Execute Order 66. Sad to say, there are a lot of people in the world putting out that order as we speak. So it's alarmingly relevant, particularly in Ukraine, one might think.
Are you ready?
How long does it take you to put on the show makeup?
Half of my life. It was, the first time, it was 4 hours. Yeah. And I was in the hands of the best people. Mcdiarmid was the guy who did my face every day in Return of the Jedi. He went on to great things, continues to do so. He did all the Harry Potter work, all of those great creatures, faces, and so on went to Nick's work. And he was, well, not exactly an apprentice in those days, but he was a young guy, but clearly with great talent. And I said, what can I, sitting there in a chair, what can I do to help? He said, you could fall asleep. So I managed that, and it was 4 a.m. in the morning. He just wanted my face to be still, so that he could work his magic. And then when we went to Australia for Revenge of the Sith, different team, very good team, Dave Elsie, yeah. And George wanted me to be able to be the horrific man in the morning and maybe, the Chancellor in the afternoon. So he wanted something much faster than 4 hours. So they devised a kind of balaclava that I put on over my head and my neck. It was fine, but it wasn't as good as Nick's stuff because it couldn't be as detailed, But it was also all right because in that film, as you'll remember, he was sort of in transition, and he was particularly hideous before it settled down. And as a result of Sam Jackson, I don't know, Daisy Ridley, Sam Jackson, what have they got against me? Anyway, Sam ruined my face. With the help of Hayden, of course, doing his best. So that's a long way of answering your question. Hello?
Hello, sir. First of all, thank you for doing these. We just love it. You're
Good to be
fantastic.
here.
Just wondering, the Emperor's powers, you eventually used the lightsaber in the earlier prequels and that sort of thing. What is your favorite power and that sort of thing, and how did you enjoy the lightsaber training and that sort of thing?
Well, I was very surprised when I read the script, 2 hours before we did the shoot, to discover that I did have a lightsaber and I was going to wield it because I imagined all my power was coming out of my fingers. I thought that's, who needs a lightsaber when you've got electric lightning? But of course, he was moving out from the very angry senator and chancellor into the monster himself. So yeah, there were fight sessions and I did a bit of training. With Nick Gillard, who's a wonderful fight director, was very understanding of someone who's not naturally a swordsman, unlike Hayden and Ewan, who were just brilliant at it, amazingly good. I did a bit of that, but most of the work was done by my stunt double, who was fantastic. And unlike a lot of stunt doubles, actually looked like me. So that was a relief. He was going to do most of the work. But then I did have to do the close-ups, obviously, all of that to make it look entirely convincing. So I got a bit of action. And that was fun, and it was good to do. And I'm afraid I did hit Sam Jackson a couple of times. He was very understanding, but I think that's why he wanted to destroy me.
Then you knocked him out of a window.
I did do that, yes. Yes, that was perhaps a little cruel, but he obviously hadn't signed up for any more movies at the time, and so it was all right. He was immediately hospitalized and recovered very quickly.
Dave, where are you at?
Hi, Ian. Thank you so much for talking with us today. I have a question for you, just as an actor. Over the course of the 3 eras of films that you were part of, do you have a favorite memory, whether it's a scene that you shot or a day on set that was very special or enjoyable or just sticks out to you over your course with the franchise?
I do. I can go straight to it. The scene I enjoyed most, and it's the one in which I had most to say. It was, I think, probably the longest dialogue season in any of the movies, and that's in Revenge of the Sith, the scene in the Opera House, where I finally managed to get him to confirm that he's going to join the dark side. And that was originally going to be shot in an even more elaborate office. The interesting thing about offices was, a lot of people didn't get much of a set, as the green screen. So I always got an enormous set with an enormous office. I imagined they'd sort of fix it later, but no. George said, no, that's how power works. Every time you get more powerful, you get a bigger office. That's how we're going to show it. But then when we got to do that scene, the one I just referred to, he said, we've had the office scenes, I think we need to shift the location a little bit. And as you like the theatre and you're a theatre actor, I thought, well, maybe they could be chatting in a theatre. in a box, the Imperial box. Well, not Imperial yet, but quite important box. And I thought that was a brilliant idea because it meant I could talk to him like that, but also look out there, pretending really I was looking at the show while having the kind of thoughts that you probably, imagined he was having. Apparently we were watching a squid ballet.
It's called Squid Lake, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
exactly, yes. Book early to avoid disappointment. And we played that scene, and it was very well written, that scene, so it was great fun to do. And it happened on a day, excuse me, I'm just going to clear my throat. I needed to do that, but also I really needed to do that on the day because we'd done, I think it was the fight scene with Sam, and so I'd had a busy day, and I don't know if you know wind machines in movies, but they're not little things underneath. They're driven by men. There are about 4 of them powered towards us during that scene to make the cloaks flow and the hair stand on end. All of which is good, but there seemed to be quite a lot of dust in the Fox Studios in Australia, and about half of it went down my throat. So it was a Friday afternoon, end of the day. I said, George, are we really going to do it now? He said, yes, we'll do it now. And if we can get it better, we'll do it. We need to get it better. We'll do it on Monday. So I said, all right. And we didn't even have time to run through the dialogue. Hayden and I, he'd been busy doing stuff elsewhere. And I said, well, I'm a bit worried about the voice. It might not sound, what we'd all like it to be. And he said, well, we'll try it anyway. And then when we did the first little rehearsal, and Ian, the voice is great. It sounds as if he's in transition. I thought, from, as it were, the Chancellor to the monster. So I stopped worrying about it then, and now you're all going to go back and switch and look at the scene. But they treated it a bit, but every time I've watched it, which isn't, that often recently, I'm conscious of the fact that half of the studio dust still down my throat. So it was a kind of nerve-wracking day, but it was also a great day. And wonderful working with Hayden anyway, and his concentration is always absolute. And since it was Friday, we didn't have time to do the reverse. In other words, all the shots were on me, he was there. And on Monday, all the shots were on him. And I also, the reason that sticks in my mind as a memory is people say, are there any redeeming features? Is there anything at all that's good about the Emperor? And I said, well, yeah, he loves going to the theatre.
He promotes the arts.
Yeah.
You called the Emperor the monster, but I remember one time in an article, right when about Rent of the Sith came out, you said you played it as if the Senator Palpatine was the costume and the real person is what you just called the monster.
That's true. The great George said one day when we were doing Phantom Menace, he said, now the thing about Senator Palpatine, I mean, we know what's underneath. Well, eventually people do in the movies, but our discussion, his and mine, tells us what's underneath. But if you thought of your face, Ian's face, the Senator's face, as a mask, and that your eyes, Ian's eyes, the Senator's eyes, were in fact unreal, were contact lenses, or sort of whatever they end up being as the Emperor, that might give you a way in. And it was completely fascinating to be told that. You wouldn't notice anything, and I didn't have to do anything. If I'd done things, it would have been, artificial. But it's wonderful to think of your own face and your own eyes as a mask, and behind that, underneath it, is something else. Something, in this case, is monstrous.
Thank you. So you were talking about the opera scene, and that actually is a good segue to what I was going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever be interested in ever going deeper into your relationship with Darth Plagueis or your master?
Well, of course, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? The only thing is, if they went into it deeper in the movies, it would have to be played by a younger actor, and that's a good idea, I think. Maybe one day they'll do that. And it would be very interesting to know, what he was like when he was really young, as opposed to, because we meet him when he's, when he was my age when I did the movie, which was sort of early 50s. It'd be interesting to go back a little further and see his, I suppose we have to admit, murder of Darth Plagueis. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. But it would be another actor. I know they're refacing people these days, we can do anything, and making them look younger. So I suppose it's not beyond the bounds of possibility, but it would be more interesting for another actor to get the opportunity to start that story.
Great question.
How might you contrast your work on some of the animated series with what you did in live action? What was it like working with Dave Filoni and some of those voice talents?
Yes, working with Dave Filoni is a treat. He's a sort of genius, Dave, one of the great Star Wars geniuses, as George would be the first to say, I think. But doing voice recordings for animated series is a lot less complicated, of course, than doing the actual movies, and it usually involves me going into a studio in Soho, and Dave getting up early in LA, and listening to the script that I've already received. So it's relatively straightforward. But I have to do the voice. I send the voice to LA, and they put it in the movies.
So my question is on the sci-fi technology. What was your experience like through the first movies to the last movies with technology?
CGI, etc. Yeah.
It was very crude in the beginning and then changed. So
Yes. Well, it was very interesting. That first day on Return of the Jedi was the first scene you see of me was in fact the first day of shooting. And when I came down that ramp, not able to see too much because the lenses in those days only enabled me to look directly ahead and not see out the corner of my eye. And on the first rehearsal, I didn't really know where I was. I knew the set description, but I hadn't seen it when we rehearsed the first scene. So, I did what I'd rehearsed in my head, and everybody said, fine, cut. And then when I could relax for a moment, I looked around and I saw what looked like thousands of people, thousands of stormtroopers. So unless you thought they were painted on, they were later, but they certainly weren't then. And they were policed by crew people going up and down in jeeps, saying, stand up straight, take your glasses off. Give me that camera. And so later on, I suppose, that would have happened CGI-wise in post, because so many people, so much money, etc. Although CGI, as I found out later, is not cheap. It's very expensive to do the process. Maybe it's got cheaper now, like things tend to over time. And then, of course, I think Phantom Menace was about the first film filmed, if you can say these two words close together, digitally. So that was a new experience, and the whole green scene, blue screen sometimes, notion came into play. So when we were up, for example, on the pods, Natalie Portman, when I was being the senator and she was the queen, we were up very high, and everything else was green, and there was some stickers, some markers showing us where the characters were, should we need to look at them. As I was saying, I was asked about this the other day, and I was saying it wasn't too difficult, because we do look across it every now and again when we're making ordinary movies. If you're doing a close-up and the actor can't really get to you because of all the people in front, it's better not to have their eye line, because otherwise you're sort of doing that, which isn't helpful in a close-up. And what they often do is just put a white piece of tape, a white cross, in the edge of the camera box, and you pay into that. So, as a film actor, we're quite used to that. But then I didn't have to do it on the same kind of scale as Hayden did and Ewan did. And they were often fighting enemies that weren't there. And George wasn't always able to tell them, whether they were enemies that everybody would be scared of, even those guys, or whether it was just something they could shrug off. So they would offer lots of alternatives, which we try to do anyway as actors. But sometimes, in the film, probably the audience wouldn't notice, it wouldn't make much difference to them, but the actors would see themselves reacting in a way they wouldn't have reacted if the thing had been real, or if they'd known actually what they were playing to. So, we all surrender our performances. It's the right thing to do. What else can you do to that box that's taken away and edited and later becomes a movie? But occasionally, some of the actors felt their performance had been surrendered, but not used in a way that they would have done or chosen to have done, should they know what was coming at them. So it's always better to have a human being to react to, in my experience, if you can. But sometimes it's impossible, and as the techniques change, so we adapt to those. But interestingly enough, on episode 9, the last movie, that was shot on film, almost all of it. And so we went back to the old way, and it was always people, that we had in front of us and people we reacted to. And we didn't have giant green screens every 5 minutes. We had, a studio and a beautiful set, certainly in my scenes, for most of the time.
Dave, that kid's had his hand up for like half an hour, his face is turning red.
What was it like filming the scenes with Yoda?
Yes, well, of course, Yoda and Frank weren't there. Back to the digital experience. Yes, there was, when I had to address him, so I was looking at him at the right, in a chair like this, I think, there was a sort of Yoda dummy, and not very helpful. We spend time making that because no one's going to see it. That I would address myself to. And then on the fight, of course, he wasn't anywhere to be seen. So I had to do a lot of jumping around and hissing and laughing and all sorts of things. That was hysterical day. George said, we got about half an hour, just give us what you've got. So I did. And tried to keep a straight face, where a straight face was appropriate. So that was my relationship with Yoda. But my relationship with Frank Oz is very good. He's a great guy. And of course, I've worked with him before when he directed Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And that was enormous fun. And Frank is enormous fun, apart from being a kind of genius.
Right
here in the front.
Hi.
Hello.
So I understand that you like to do Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, what's your favorite play of his and why?
Well, that's an easy one. My favorite play of his is King Lear, which one day I'd like to play. No immediate plans. But if anybody's listening, I've got my agent's number. And it's one of the most, well, perhaps the most pitiless of his plays. It's about many things, but the central story of King Lear, in case you don't know, is about a man with far too much power who abuses it, behaves in an authoritarian manner, has no interest in his people, is only interested in his immediate circle, is not very interested in them. And then he makes the mistake, which seemed like a good idea at the time, of dividing his kingdom between, originally he's got plans, he's got 3 daughters, he's going to give them about a third each, although the youngest daughter would get the largest part, but the youngest daughter refuses to praise him, so he flies into a rage and banishes her to France. And then he says he'll come and stay with the other 2 daughters, even though he's already divided the kingdom, and they don't want him. So he's rejected. And he becomes dejected, physically and emotionally. Let me not be mad, he says. Well, he goes mad. And he's thrown out. He is nowhere to live. And the rain rains, and the hail hails, and the wind blows in his face. But he also sees what it's like to live that kind of existence. In other words, to be homeless. No shelter, no food, no nothing. And he sees how a lot of his kingdom, a lot of the people in his kingdom have lived their lives. And the great irony of the play is he sort of regrets that he hasn't paid any attention to that while he was king. But now it's too late because he's gone mad. And then the play, there are many other characters and many other situations, sweeps forward. And at the end, it's extremely sad and harrowing. And there's a little moment where he achieves sanity, but it doesn't last. And it's a cruel, difficult world. And the play doesn't really offer any hope of it getting better. And yet it's a play that people love, because I think it tells it like it, well, not always is, but is a large part of the time. And if you're living a kind of life in circumstances that are far from ideal, it really resonates now.
Do you own an Emperor Palpatine action figure collection?
No, I don't. I've tried not to, but I've seen some interesting ones, and friends of mine, have very big collections. They're always asking me to sign. I said, well, you have to come to a convention, so I join the queue like everybody else. But no, I don't. That's about the short answer to your question.
You don't have one little
No,
one little Darth Sidious Lego?
Isn't that a terrible thing? No, I don't think I do. No, I'm always interested though in new ones that are brought along or photographs that come up. But no, I try. Otherwise, I think speaking of King Lear, I might go mad.
One more youngling right here. Are you ready?
What's your favorite movie in Jedi?
My favorite Star Wars movie. I think it has to be The Revenge of the Sith, because that's the one in which most happens to him, and I've got most to do. Although I really enjoyed the last one, having been resurrected. And I loved being in that mechanism, that got me around, the galactic electric chair. And it was, I was fitted for it. Imagine being fitted for that. And they were going to have two. It was going to be one where I would be on my knees for the close-ups. But I thought that was going to do terrible things to my back, so we scrapped that. And I was standing upright and held in by, every possible kind of safety device, and manipulated by four guys who were great. And they said, Ian, no, they were London, they didn't have an American accent. Ian, when you move, we'll give you a heads up. Okay. I said, yeah, I'd be grateful, thank you. And they would always give me a heads up, but it was usually the second after they'd taken off. So we're going to go now. Yeah, go. Thank you. And I like flying around the studio. I've always wanted to fly, and it was great fun. And Daisy was worried more about me than I was worried about myself, And she said, oh God, I think I'm going to have a heart attack if they do that to you again. I said, no, I'll be the one having the heart attack. Haven't you read the script? Anyway, that was that.
Was that stagehand Michael Caine? He sounded like Michael Caine.
Maybe it was, yes. Always hard to see, it's always so dark in those studios, yeah.
We're right over here in the back.
Way in the back.
Right here.
My master wishes to know if you lost the fight to Mace Windu on purpose. Did you throw the fight?
Yeah, it was all worked out in advance. I wanted to get, the character, yeah, yes. The character really, he manipulated the whole of that. And it was principally about not just getting rid of Mace, but getting Anakin to do it. Anakin to get actively involved in the path towards destroying people who got in my way. So, yeah, it was a psychological ploy with huge practical effects.
So you're saying officially, Palpatine would have beaten Mace?
I don't like the word officially.
Okay, unofficially. Your opinion.
Unofficially. In this quite private conversation we're having.
That's a great question. Dave? Where's he at now? It's like a little game. You gotta find the long water. Where is it? There it is.
Did you prefer being the...
Where are you? Okay. Oh yes, I see. Hi.
Did you prefer being the council, the senator, or Darth Sidious?
Yeah, I think you know the answer to that. We actors love playing bad people. Although it was very interesting playing the senator, for the reasons I discussed earlier about my face being, his face and so on. it was very hard not to sort of do little bits of evil glinting, you know. But George quite rightly said, no, we just, you know, he's too clever for that. You know, he's got this perfect mask, and that no one would ever know what was going on underneath. So I suppose that was. They were equally enjoyable because they demanded different things. But yeah, if you're going to pin me down, Darth Sidious every time.
Right over here in the center.
What would be your most memorable blooper that happened while filming?
Blooper. Well, I can't possibly repeat it, I'm afraid. maybe one day you'll see it. I was up that flying thing, and it was all very quiet and very careful, and I said the wrong words, and then I said an English phrase that certainly wasn't in the script, and everyone screamed, "Blooper!" So, I haven't seen it yet. Maybe it's around somewhere, but that was it. And also, you know, sliding down chutes and things like that. That's just made for bloopers, you know. Oh, yes. And as I said earlier, up there in my flying machine, there are lots of moments.
Across any of the 9 movies, is there one scene or even just an actor that you're jealous that you didn't get to play or you would have loved to have been in instead of your character?
That's quite an interesting question because it's around somewhere, and maybe someday they'll release it. But in the script that we filmed 3 years ago now, is it? Yeah. I revealed the fact to Adam, to Kylo, that Daisy Ray was my granddaughter. And in the movie, for reasons of speed, really, it was, you know, Kylo already knew and told her that he did, I think. But it was, when I read it, I thought, this is, you know, I went, what? To myself, this is a great moment of revelation. And as a character, I liked having it, you know, and as the actor, I liked having it too. But the great frisson was in the studio when we did it, because, you know, I'm the only person who has, apart from, you know, JJ and a few other need-to-know people, the person who has the script. I mean, people in the studio, there's at least 200 people, probably more, you know, surrounding you. They don't get a script, you know, they get to see what's happening on the day, but not in advance. So they didn't know I wasn't dead. And when my voice first came through, and there was a lot of this, and it was cut back going for the movie, when Kylo comes through to find me in Exegol, he wanders along for a bit, and my voice is the first thing that he hears, sort of tantalizing him. And my voice was just like this. They gave me a mic, and they said, it's a God mic. In other words, you know, the whole of the studio would hear my lines. And they didn't know that I was going to be there. So on the first take, there was a lot of suppressed, oh my gods. You could just, oh my God, you know. And that was great. And so when it came to the moment of revelation that she was indeed my granddaughter, the oh my gods were sort of unrestrained, really. And I think I just know Adam must have known. Yes, I think he did. He had his script, so it was clear then. But it was good to do, good to reveal. But you know, that's show business, and it exists someday. So you'll maybe see it as an extra. We don't do DVDs anymore, but an extra somewhere. Yeah.
Well, we're coming down to the end. So I just want to ask you one last quick question before we go. We talked about our favorite Star Wars movies, Revenge of the Sith and Empire, which comes up. Do you have a favorite movie?
Yes, I think it has to be Revenge of the Sith for the reason I said.
No, I meant.
Oh, you mean of all time?
Of all movies. I wanted to know what your favorite movie was.
Oddly enough, because it had a big effect on me when I was quite young. I was at drama school, Bonnie and Clyde. For the reason was, it was such a clever film and so brilliantly done. Arthur Penn, wonderfully acted. Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. And I think what caught my imagination was it was a film about two people who were immensely unsympathetic, because, you know, they were bank robbers and killers and all the rest of it, but were also very sympathetic. And I like that contrast. I like being sort of, you know, encouraged, maybe seduced, to empathize with people who are not really empathizable with, if that's such a word. Because I think that's the essence of drama, really. It's a kind of confusion, but it's an enjoyable confusion because it makes you think and it makes you feel in different ways. And that film did that to me.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming. This was a fantastic interview. I hope you enjoyed it as much as
I love it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you don't mind, and hit the alert button so you'll know when new videos come out, and I will see you soon. Thank you.